When you see that they are devoid of self like a shower of rain, a waterfall, or an empty house, abide in this conviction until it fades. When rain falls from the sky, the raindrops are not singular. Every subsequent raindrop differs from the previous one, so they are not permanent. Their falling depends on causes and conditions without freedom. Examine how the 5 aggregates are like the rain. The 5 aggregates are like rain, a waterfall, and an empty house. Think how absurd the cycle of reincarnation is. Ordinary beings strive to adorn an illusory self, the skin, beautify it, the physical body, show it personality, the aggregate of mental formations, design it, the physical body, and the aggregate of consciousness, satisfy it, fulfill desires or the aggregate of mental formations, and express it. They endeavor, grasp, and experience joy and sorrow for the sake of the self. All physical and mental activities are driven by the attachment to self. However, ordinary beings fail to realize that this self is illusory and non-existent. We dedicate our entire lives to it, only to discover in the end that there is no one inside this house. It's like someone believing there is a master in a house and serving him for their entire life, only to find out that there is no one inside, only a machine operating. If one day people awaken to the absence of self, then nothing in samsara can be established. The foundation of cyclic existence will tremble and the 3 realms will collapse. Without a self, why does pain arise? It's your mental factor of sensation that feels painful and your aggregate of mental formations that functions. Through practice, we can transcend them. After entering the meditative absorption of the form realm, the feelings of the desire realm disappear. By refraining from creating karma through practice, suffering ceases, no suffering of suffering and suffering of change. So where is the self? Isn't it non-existent? Therefore, the suffering of change don't exist inherently. They are constructed later. Thus, it's not I that suffers. It's the body consciousness that distinguishes the aggregate of sensation that feels and the aggregate of mental formations that acts. They play their respective roles. There is no self. Yet, overcoming self-grasping is not easy. Self-grasping is very cunning. When you try to catch it, it slips away like an eel. If you superficially drive it away, it will hide in deeper layers beyond your awareness. You may think it is gone, but it remains hidden, not eradicated. The foundation of cyclic existence will tremble, and the 3 realms will collapse. All thoughts, words, and actions rooted in self-grasping will gradually cease. So, please continuously address the root, counteract self-grasping ego, and self-cherishing. Since there is no self, what the 5 aggregates do becomes pointless. While you still have karmic tendencies, you won't listen to them. You no longer follow them. You begin to combat them. Previously, all our efforts were to serve the self, but now there is no self. It's like being enslaved by an organization, only to realize that the organization doesn't exist. So why continue being a slave? Likewise, since there is no I, everything done for I becomes unnecessary. Meditating on non-self is crucial. Once you realize it, you will shake the foundation of samsara. At that time, Mara's palace will quake. Even when you are about to eradicate self-grasping, Mara's palace will tremble because Mara is the ego. That's why uprooting self-grasping is not easy. When self-grasping is on the verge of collapse, the demonic abode trembles. Since even the three realms are collapsing, how could the demonic abode not tremble? The mountains of afflictions will crumble one after another, and the endless river of attachment will dry up. Therefore, the insight of non-self is the foundation of the path to liberation. If we cultivate it sufficiently, we can uproot cyclic existence and attain complete liberation. Therefore, don't underestimate the power of demons. Whether they are celestial or external demons, they can infiltrate anywhere and attack you at any time, tempting and deceiving your self-grasping. Even if you study non-self every day, your self-grasping may not have diminished at all. Previously, we regarded the five aggregates as a permanent, singular, and free self. It's like mistaking a rope for a snake when no snake is present. Due to this delusion, we create karma and remain trapped in samsara. Now, we should go against the current of the cycle of birth and death and constantly reflect on the nature of the five aggregates. See them like a river, a waterfall, or an empty house, thereby correcting our understanding of the five aggregates. After attaining this insight of non-self, abide in it to gradually strengthen it. In this way, we can overcome self-grasping. Therefore, continuously abide in this insight until it fades. We should meditate on non-self continuously. Once we slack off, self-grasping will immediately emerge. Sometimes we may feel frustrated and unwilling to continue the practice. We might think there is obviously a self, so why should I reflect on non-self? Thus, we fight with ourselves every day. When self-attachment arises, we don't want to meditate on non-self because it's like suicide. Is eliminating the self like suicide? Who would want to end their self? Yet, this suicide is like revolution, killing the ego without mercy. We shall engage in a collective revolution to uproot self-grasping. Some cults advocate collective suicide. They killed the physical body and then fell into the three lower realms. But they failed to sever self-grasping. What use is it to cut off the flesh? The flesh is not the self. We need to find the root, self-grasping, and sever it. What use is it to kill the physical body? These cults lacking wisdom have gone astray? How pitiful. We should use wisdom to distinguish the wrong paths of samsara from the right path to liberation. Once we have recognized the path to liberation, we should follow it steadfastly. Previously, we constantly clung to the notion of self. As a result, we became deluded and created karma, undergoing cycles of birth and death. From now on, we should return to the right path and continuously rectify our minds. We should not always think about me. Only by breaking free from this deluded habit and constantly activating the insight of non-self can we resonate with truth and transcend samsara. This practice addresses the first layer of ignorance. It is a truth, though not the ultimate one. First, shatter this layer of ignorance. This work is not easy. We should constantly activate mindfulness in our daily lives. For example, if we speak without abiding in the insight of non-self, we will immediately fall into confusion. When you see your spiritual teacher in daily life, you might immediately become mindless. Ideally, when meeting your teacher, you should immediately activate mindfulness. In the past, when we met our guru, our mindfulness would arise instantly because the guru is the embodiment of mindfulness. When the teacher is not around you, you might sometimes slack off and let your mind wander. But when encountering your guru, would you still indulge in deluded thoughts? You should immediately activate mindfulness and see non-self because the guru embodies truth. Don't cling to the guru's physical body. If you do, you will be in trouble. Is there anything worth clinging to in the physical body? When you see your guru, reflect on non-self immediately because the guru is selfless. If you think with yourself grasping, the teacher also has the notion of I. You are speculating about their spiritual state with a samsaric mind. How ignorant. So, don't judge others with your mind, because you don't know their state of mind. If you activate mindfulness immediately upon encountering your teacher,
it shows that your mind abides in the Dharma,
not in samsaric thoughts. If you see your spiritual teacher with a samsaric mind, you may arouse attachment or joy, but not mindfulness. In the past, when we saw our teacher, we saw the Dharma. I didn't often visit my teacher, but when I held his book, I felt it more real than seeing him physically present. When I heard his Dharma teachings, I fully experienced his selfless state. Practice Guru devotion to experience the Guru's selfless mind and freedom from attachments. Resonate with the Guru's mind to uproot self-grasping. Other delusions are pointless. Don't daydream. Many people have practiced for years but still cling to the notion of a self. Some people seem to lack shame. They have been here for many years but still have ingrained self-grasping. I have been teaching the essentials for purifying the mind since 2007. Some individuals have been here for many years but haven't addressed the slightest self-grasping. They often say, "I'm not feeling well. Please give me some medicine." Or during meditation, "I experienced certain states and my soul almost left my body. Please bless me so that my soul won't run away and get lost." Do you know how I feel when I hear such words? I feel numb and speechless. Only when you reflect on non-self can you experience the teacher's spiritual state. Even if you only experience a slight freedom of non-self, that will be wonderful. However, you constantly cling to the notion of self. "Alice, I can only show compassion to you. Now I've become a bandit in the woods as I am constantly surrounded by your self-clinging. I meditate on non-self in seclusion, but when I see you, I have to face your sense of self. Alice, I am staying in the forest of samsaric attachments." You don't cultivate the insight of non-self. Instead, you constantly cling to the notion of self. You have ingrained self-grasping, yet you share it with me and try to nurture my self-grasping. I use non-self to train you, and you use self-grasping to influence me in return. It's frustrating. Without bodhicitta, it's hard to be your teacher. If we don't abide in the insight of non-self, we will immediately fall into confusion and subconsciously believe that there is a subjective I speaking. In reality, speaking is like the wind blowing a bell. It's simply the wind driving the vocal organs, vocal cords, tongue, etc., to produce sound. There is no need to establish an I. When walking, we should also be aware that it's just the wind of the mind driving the puppet-like forelimbs to move. We should walk while abiding in the insight of only aggregates without a self. When walking, the aggregates of form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness operate as a whole, making it easy for us to cling to the notion of self. When eating, we should also be mindful that there are only the 5 aggregates experiencing the taste, but no eater I. It is not me who is eating. In other words, it's merely the tongue continuously contacting the tastes, giving rise to various sensations. Yet, in the composite and momentary tongue faculty, taste, tongue consciousness, and mental factor of sensation, there is no permanent, singular, and free self. When watching television, we should be aware that there is no audience eye. It's just the eyes and ears, combined with the visual images and sounds, that continuously give rise to various illusory consciousnesses. There is no need to construct an eye and let desire, aversion, joy, or sorrow arise based on these appearances. During spiritual practice, don't think I'm meditating, I have merits, etc. In reality, it's simply the 5 aggregates arising and ceasing. For example, during prostrations, our hands come together, limbs move, the mouth recites, and the mind visualizes. In every moment, it's simply the 5 aggregates that arise and cease. There is no self in the hands, vocal cords, tongue airflow, sound wave, or mindfulness. It's not I abiding in mindfulness, but the aggregate of mental formations and the aggregate of consciousness functioning. Therefore, engage in all Dharma practice with the insight of non-self. How wonderful it is to practice in this way. When wearing nice clothes, don't think, I'm beautiful. How can you be beautiful? Others appreciate your clothing, not your body. It's merely a layer of cloth covering the composite and defiled aggregates. No matter what you add to these aggregates, you cannot turn them into a permanent, singular, and free self. Since there is no self, how can there be a self that looks beautiful? When others mention your name, you don't need to care about it too much. In reality, the name refers to the collection of these aggregates. We must maintain mindfulness at all times. Otherwise, when we receive praise, combined with our ignorance, we may instantly consider ourselves remarkable. In fact, there is only the vibration of sound waves in the air. How can an illusory voice produce and elevate a self like a barren woman's biological child? When others praise you, you may become proud, and your corresponding mental factors start to work. Once you reflect in this way, you will laugh and see that it's nothing more than mistaken attitudes causing trouble. Mistaken attitudes also arise from the functioning of the aggregate of mental formations and the aggregate of consciousness. You can practice patience in such circumstances. Even if someone calls you a fool or whatever, you shouldn't mind. The same principle applies when perceiving objects. For example, if you think, I love her, her walking posture is charming, you should reflect that what you see is just a wooden figure whose motion is driven by the wind of karma. If you find someone's voice melodious, you should recognize it as the sound of a wind chime. Therefore, everything stems from the notion of self, an unbalanced state of mind. If you perceive yourself as ugly and feel inferior, you should recognize that your self-grasping is causing trouble. If you examine yourself, you will find only aggregates and no self. In short, when seeing objects, hearing sounds, dressing, eating, working, practicing, or interacting with others at any time and place, we must be mindful that there are only aggregates but no self. By repeatedly training our minds in this way, we can uproot afflictions. Okay, that's all for today's teaching.